It has come to my information that so many landlords in Nigeria, so many tenants in Nigeria don't know their rights. Landlords don't know their rights. Tenants don't know some of their rights. So this video is to help prospective tenants or landlords to be, or those that are inspiring to be tenants or landlords, to know a little bit of what is expected of them in this tenancy landlord relationship. Just relax, stay tuned, and learn something. Tenancy issues are one of the most common legal disputes, and many tenants and landlords do not fully understand their rights and obligations. I'm going to give you like a little, might not be so concise, but I don't want the video to be too long, so it's going to be a little breakdown of the key legal aspects involving tenants and landlord. First, what's a tenancy agreement? A tenancy agreement is a contract between the landlord and a tenant that outlines their rights and responsibilities. Note that they can also be oral agreements, which are also valid. But it's always preferable for you to have a written tenancy agreement so that in case of any dispute, you can actually bring out something feasible for anyone to see and go through your terms. Written agreements are always better for clarity and proof. A well-drafted tenancy agreement should include 1. Names of both parties, that is, the landlord and the tenant, must be clearly stated. 2. Description of the property, the location, the address, the type, the size. Everything must be concise and precise in the tenancy agreement. 3. Duration of the tenancy. You have to state clearly if it's a monthly tenancy, yearly, fixed term, half yearly, or anyhow you want it to be, weekly, anyhow you want it to be. Then you have to also state the rent amount and payment method. It has to be clearly stated, the rent amount and how it will be paid. You have to also include deposit and service charges, if any. You have to also include responsibilities for repairs and maintenance. In the course of this video, you'll discover that there are some things that actually is rifts between the landlords and the tenants. Maybe when it comes to fixing some parts of the house, or maybe when there's a leaking roof, maybe there's a defect in the property. There's usually some fights that comes up, who's going to fix it and who's not going to fix this. Most times you should actually include this in your agreements. It should also include notice period for termination. Like if you some tenancy agreements actually have a specification that I'm going to give you a 6-month notice to terminate, or I'm going to give you a 1-day notice to terminate. Most contracts or tenancy agreements actually have those specifications, but it's not actually entirely compulsory for you to have them. Then you can also have grounds for eviction stated clearly on your tenancy agreements. Maybe they can come in terms of rules. Maybe if you do this, I will evict you. If you do this, I won't evict you. All those kind of things should be stated clearly in your tenancy agreement. So as a tenant, you should also make sure those things are clearly stated in order to help you have a very fruitful tenancy. And as a landlord, you should also be careful to make sure you add all those things to state clearly, so that if any rule is broken, you can have something tangible and physical for you to show that you actually included this during the period of this tenancy agreement. Note: as a tenant, if your landlord refuses to give you a written agreement, you have the right to demand for that agreement. It is your right under the law, so you can. In Lagos, the tenancy law of Lagos State 2011 applies, while other states also have their own tenancy laws. So you have to ask if it is not given to you by your landlord as a tenant. As a landlord, it is your right to actually provide that agreement, to actually help and guide you too during the course of that tenancy. As a tenant in Nigeria, the law does not give your landlord that will or the permission to kick you out of a property without giving you a notice to quit. The law provides minimum notice periods depending on the type of tenancy, whether yearly, half-yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, as you'll be seeing on the screen. For a yearly tenancy, you're entitled to a 6-month notice. For a half-yearly tenancy, you're entitled to a 3-month notice. For a monthly tenancy, you're entitled to a 1-month notice, and for a weekly tenancy, you're entitled to a 3 days notice before you can be thrown out of that property by your landlord. If a landlord wants to evict you without following this process, they are acting illegally. The correct process is first issuing a quit notice. Then, if after that quit notice, you don't leave that premises and deliver up possession to the owner, who is the landlord, then he will issue a 7 days notice of intentions to recover possession. And after that notice, if you don't leave, then he has the permission to institute an action against you in court. And then in that action, he can actually claim for his arrears of rent. He can actually claim for damages. And if you're found guilty and a judgment is against you in court, they can also obtain a court order and you pay for those damages, arrears of rent, and you still be kicked out of the property. So as a tenant, you should know that your landlord has to give you a notice before you're thrown out of a property. And as a landlord, you have to know that you have to give your tenant notice. They require statutory notices before you can actually throw them out of your property. Right here is one big issue that some tenancy agreements usually end because of all these repair issues and questions on who handles repairs and maintenances and damages. The law says major repairs like roofing, plumbing, and structural issues are the landlord's responsibilities. But minor repairs like changing locks or fixing light bulbs falls on the tenant. You can't be staying in someone's property and then the door handle spoils and you call the tenant, you call the landlord. Maybe the wardrobe you're using, the handle falls and you're calling the landlord, or maybe the bed you're sleeping on, due to your weight, you break one of the legs and you're calling the landlord. It's crazy. You can't do all those things. You can't call the landlord for all those minor repairs. But when it comes to that's why when you're inspecting a house, you have to look at the patent and the latent defects. You have to look at the visible defects, and so you call it to the attention of the landlord immediately on who is going to fix them before you move in. But if you're moving and you notice some plumbing issues, roofing issues, structural issues, it's meant for the landlord to fix those things. But when you're living in a house, even if you break a tile, you are supposed to fix it because it is your responsibility at that moment. That house, it's in your possession. So you need to fix those things. You can't spoil maybe an issue with your toilet seat and you call your landlord to come and fix it. He doesn't use those things. Those things are being used by you. So you have to fix them. Because if you have your own house, you won't expect someone to call you for all those little fixing issues when you can actually do that because you're the end user of those properties or those things you're calling them to fix. If a tenant refuses to pay rent, the landlord or you as a landlord must follow the legal process. You cannot lock out the tenant or seize the property. Like I have already stated before, you have to follow due process. Instead, you must first serve a proper quit notice. Then if possession is still not delivered to you, you give a 7 days notice to recover possession. And then 3, you can go to court to actually take back possession of your property. But you have to follow due process. And as a tenant in Nigeria, please let us try our best not to put landlords in difficult situations in order to forego long legal actions and some issues that will lead to broken relationships, physical relationships, and in life. Life is too short for us to hold grudges. So we should try to actually pay our rent. And if you know you cannot meet up. Maybe you can have a discussion with your landlord, tete-a-tete discussion with your landlord. These things, people are human. We understand that people go through a lot of things. So have a discussion with your landlord and try to see how you can manage the situation. And even for landlords too, court actions usually linger in court. For some actions, some tenancy actions linger for 2 years, 3 years, and at that period in time, the tenant will still be in that house. So most times it's good for you to resolve these things amicably, so that if the tenant is asking for like maybe 2 months to move, instead of you to go to court and then waste a lot of time, you can actually handle this thing amicably. Give him that 2 months instead of wasting that time in court. Then when he leaves, so that you can actually rent out your house and make your money. So this is usually something that you can handle amicably. But it's also, and it is finally advised that knowing your rights can save you from legal trouble. That is it. When you're a tenant, or whether you're a tenant or landlord, always follow due process. If you found the video helpful and you know that it is actually something that you actually learned from this, actually something you learned from this video, just help me like, follow, and subscribe to my page, and you're going to get more insights and more knowledge from my daily posts on my channel and on my page. Thank you very, very much for listening and learning something.